I guess we'll just go ahead and roll here. So if you came for Optimizing the Programmer, you are in the right place. I'm Dave, and really excited to be here. Hello, Oslo. This is fun. So yeah, I want to talk to you today about value. I want to talk about not necessarily the value that you deliver as a programmer, but I want to talk about the things that you value. You've probably all heard this story, right? There's this bank that calls you up and says, hey, I've got an account for you, and this account every day is going to have a deposit of 86,400 units of some monetary currency, right? And you have that day to spend that currency. At the end of the day, it is gone. And there is no saving of this thing from day to day. And when you go into the next day, you start with a fresh balance of that same 86,400 units. And of course, the punchline of this thing is that you do, in fact, have such account. And you're thinking about what am I going to do with this account that I lose every day, that I'm going to have to keep on trying to spend this thing every day. And the punchline is that this is your time, right? This is the number of seconds that you have every day: 24 hours, 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. Are you going to squander that time that you have every day, or are you going to use it to your potential in utility of things that you value? And so that's a very personal question, and it really gets into that question of what is valuable to you. And so there are a lot of different answers on this. So before we dig too much into value and optimization and all of those things, let me introduce myself. As I mentioned, my name is Dave. I am an American. I live in Denver. And I'm a geek, right? I love software. I like writing code. I am a big fan of Star Wars. Have watched all of the Clone Wars with my kids and just having a blast with that. I like basketball. Most of all, I like children. My kids, I have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. They are 10, 9, and 7. And they are the light of my life. They are my source of joy. They are everything that matters to me. Well, that's not true. They are most of everything that matters to me. And my kids are what's really important to me. Some of you are probably at least somewhat familiar with me. You might have heard my voice before because I am a podcaster. I release 2 episodes every week of the interviews that I do with awesome developers. Developeronfire.com if you're not familiar with that. I've had a lot of interviews with some amazing people and found out a lot about what they value and a lot about some stories about their successes and failures and all kinds of things. And something that's really interesting, and you may be wondering, why is this relevant to this talk, is that I ask each of the guests about a source of pain and suffering for them. And all the time, not all the time, there are a lot of different answers that I get to that question, but very often, right, a majority of the answers have been about not having the time to do all of the things that I want to do, right? I've got so much tech I want to dig into. I've got things I want to do with my family, all of these conflicting things. And we have a problem, right? It is universal in the human condition that the opportunity cost is real. And any time that you say yes to one thing, you are saying no to an infinite array of other things that you could have been doing with that time. Time is of the utmost importance, and that's why I want to get into a lot of this using your time wisely. So I'm not an authority, right? I don't have all the answers. I haven't figured out a way to beat the finite nature of time, unfortunately, right? I wish I could stand here and give you the answer. Really, I'm a fellow traveler on the road, right? We're all together going down this journey of trying out how to do the best that we can, make the best use of our time each day, to deliver on the things that are really important to us, okay? So those things may be software itself, right? And that is important, right? We all want to deliver business value to our customers, our clients, our business, or whoever it is that we serve in our jobs. But we have bigger things too, right? You need to serve yourself, and you need to give yourself those things that matter to you. To me, that's my family, right? So I want to talk about motivation. if we are going to dig into this thing of optimizing and trying to do the best that we can, right, just like in software, if you come to me and say, hey, I want this widget on the web page in the top right corner, I'm going to ask you, why, right? I can't really deliver my best on what you were trying to do if I don't dig into your motivation and think about that. Pam Sully, who was a guest on my podcast, she had this video. It was an Ignite talk at a user group in Philadelphia, I think. And I have a link to that video. I have a link on my blog that has links to all of the things I'm referencing here. So I'm going to give you that at the end of this, and it's easy to get to, and then you can find this video if you want to see this. She had this talk basically admonishing IT workers to go home. And she used some terms that were a little more colorful than that, and if you're sensitive to those things, you might not want to watch that video. But the gist, the point of the thing was that if you need to put in extra hours at the office, that doesn't mean you're awesome. That doesn't mean that you're dedicated and you're delivering. It means that you failed to deliver on what you wanted to do during the time that you had allotted to that thing. And now you're spending extra time. You are sacrificing of yourself for free, largely, right, depending on the type of arrangement that you have with whoever it is that you are working for. So my motivation is this, right? This picture, my wife snapped that. This was January 1st, 2013. And it was right after midnight. She posted this picture to Facebook with a caption of, "They just couldn't quite make it to midnight." Right? This was the first year that my daughters decided that they were going to stay up and they were going to see the new year come in. And so they were really excited about that. And a little bit before midnight, my oldest daughter came and got close to me. And then my youngest daughter did. And of course, those warm bodies, right? This is the result. And this to me, I do this meditation practice called the quick coherence technique. And part of that is trying to bring your nervous system in alignment with your emotions. And one of the things one of the pieces of that is envisioning something that brings you joy, something really happy and heartfelt. And when I do that meditation technique, this is the image that I see. So I just wanted to really drive home that there are things in life that are bigger than doing software. And so I want you to be able to figure out what those things are for yourself, and you probably have some idea of that already, right? There's probably a lot of the audience members that feel exactly that I do, that family is the thing that's important. Or maybe you're working on, a particular product, a particular business in your day job, and some open source project is your thing that keeps you going, right? Whatever it is, you have something that is your thing, and I want you to be able to dedicate yourself to that thing in addition to delivering on your day job. So having addressed the question of why, right, I don't want to jump right into how. Okay, let's think about the what. What is this thing that we are trying to eke the most performance out of that we can so that we can get our stuff done, so that we can live our lives? Programmers, right? I really, this definition is funny, but there's something to it too, right? You're a device. You are a machine, right? You are a collection of hardware and software working together, right? You are a body. You are a mind. I like to think of the mind as that thing, that software that's running, that is you. It's that thing that is the thing that is your being when you are doing software development work, right? The software of the mind is you, the programmer. The developer has a lot of supporting hardware to make sure that that software runs right, including all of your organs, right? Your brain is the core, the CPU that thing's running on, and there's a bunch of supporting hardware, cooling systems, waste removal, all kinds of things to make sure that that system is able to continue operating autonomously. So this is what I think we are, right? We're a brain, we're a mind running on that brain, and we're a bunch of other things to support that thing. Now, you are a general purpose computer, so you're doing things besides software development. Thought work isn't the only thing that you do, but in the context of software development, right, that's what you are. You're a mind, and that mind is connected to some fingers that are connected to a keyboard. But that's inconsequential. The mind is the thing that's really doing the work. So I wrote a blog post a while back about what I think are the 5 pillars of optimizing the programmer. And so one of the things, right, the first thing that I put on that list is hardware. We all know that your software, the thing that you are delivering, is not going to run optimally if the hardware is inadequate. Did I say that right? Inadequate, right? So you need to have good enough hardware to run your software. Ideally, you want to have a big, beefy machine that can do all of those things for you. Okay? And so to me, taking care of your body is the first piece of optimizing the programmer. So I think there's a lot of pieces to that, and there are trade-offs involved in every piece of this thing, right? So your priorities may conflict with some pieces of this. In an ideal world, you are going to have that absolute nutrition that is going to take care of your brain, make sure that you are operating on all cylinders. There are reasons that you might not. In fact, I myself, I went down a path for close to 2 years of being very religious about what I would eat, and it paid off. I was in the best shape of my life, and I could measure that in the way that I performed writing software. I could measure that by the way that I would block shots playing basketball, right? There were some very clear things that do not happen as much when I'm in the condition I am in now versus the condition I was in when I was taking care of myself at my utmost. But you need to think about that you need to live your life too. Now, if that's all about just taste of food, well, that's decisions you got to make. I found that when I was eating my best, it separated me a little bit from my family because my kids didn't want to eat the things that I wanted to eat. And so when I would take them for ice cream and I would sit there watching them eat, that was fine. But it drove a little bit of a wedge. I wasn't as close to them as I could have been. When I said, okay, guys, you know what? I'm going to eat ice cream with you, they were ecstatic, and we were so connected. So, these things that I'm saying here, right, need to be taken with a grain of salt and fit in with your own personal value system. And I don't want to harp on diet too much, but I do want to talk a little bit about nutrition because it's important. Okay? Now, digging into diet and thinking about the things that you eat and how it serves you as a programmer, well, there is a lot of things that are subjective about that. Not necessarily subjective, but there are differing opinions, and it's such a complex system that you're dealing with that it's almost seeming to be non-deterministic as far as the output of what's going on. So I'm not going to harp on things. I'm just going to say here, your brain is made of cholesterol. Fat is essential for your brain to operate. So, there are a lot of people that have different types of diets, vegan diets, things that might be lower in fat, and really, much of the world has professed that low-fat diets are best for you. I think that's misguided. I'm no doctor, so don't necessarily take my word for it, but think about these things and come to your own conclusions. Do you guys know who this guy is here that I have on the graphic? Who knows who that is? Nobody? This is John Harvey Kellogg. That name ring a bell? The cornflake, right? So he was a very religious man. I believe Seventh-day Adventist for at least a portion of his religious life. And he became a disciple of another guy named Sylvester Graham. And these guys were very puritanical in their beliefs about sexuality. Sylvester Graham, the inventor of the graham cracker, right? So you've got cornflakes and graham crackers, the original low-fat, high-carbohydrate foods, right? Not necessarily original, but a strong case study in that particular thing. Now, these guys created these foods, designed them specifically to suppress libido. They were sabotaging the natural workings of the body. So I would just say, that doesn't necessarily relate directly to software development, but it does relate to the condition of your body and some of the things that your body really needs. Think about that, deficiencies in some nutrients can have some very negative effects both for your brain and other functions of your body. So I want to say two things about diet before we move on. One of those that I just said is fat, right? The other is vegetables. You need the micronutrients in vegetables. I like to say a lot that I'm a vegetarian, just not exclusively, because I think it is essential that you get plenty of vegetables. So if you really want to be at your best day in, day out as you're doing software, vegetables is another piece of that. I think that is a lot less controversial. There's not going to be too many of us that disagree with that from wherever you come. be it a meat eater as you may be, adding some vegetables is probably not something that can hurt. So the condition of your body, right? I want to still dig into this idea of why, right? When you look at a sculpted, lean body like this, what do you think? Is that the kind of body that you want? Or the equivalent, the female equivalent, right? Who wants to look like that? There's a few of us that do, right? Yeah. And so, but there are some downsides to this, right? Being extremely lean means that there are some hazards to some of your organs, right? There are some health detractions from being too lean. Obviously, being obese, going in the other direction, has some health risks. But being too lean has some health risks, including some sexual side effects, right? There can be some hormone dysregulation that happens if you become too lean. So looking like this, right, I think it becomes pretty superficial when you base the condition that you desire on how you look. And there may be some consequences to the way you look in terms of being able to attract a mate or some of those things. It may improve your confidence as you go into certain things. Ideally, I think we software developers especially, hopefully, have different sources of confidence than really just how we look. So I'm all for being in tip-top physical shape, but I think be clear on why you want it. And is it really just vanity? You want people to look at you? Well, maybe that is a valid reason. It's not for me. So be cognizant of that. In addition, I just wanted to share this. This was a quote that I found from a book, and I'm not going to read this to you, but I will say that basically the gist of this from an author that I really like a lot, Tim Ferriss. He said that if you eat and take care of yourself for fertility, you maximize that part of your system, then other things are going to fall in line. And I think that kind of falls behind it with the idea of Harvey Kellogg and Sylvester Graham, or John Harvey Kellogg, that this is really a sabotage of your body. If you want maximum performance, your fertility is a pretty good proxy for that. So that's one way to measure how you're doing as far as your condition. So enough about the hardware, right? We all know that being in better shape helps us do better. This guy is the guy I think of when I think of software. So that's my software, right? So you want your mind to be working well. You want your programmer skills to be working well. There's probably not a whole lot to say about that. I threw a shot in here of a game that I've heard some claims that playing some mind training types of games can increase your working memory and your IQ. I think those claims should be taken with some skepticism. There have been conflicting studies on these kinds of things. But playing this particular game, Dual N-Back, is something that I have found is a pretty good way to measure the impact of some things that are going on, right? If I'm making some dietary changes, then I can kind of see, well, how does that impact my performance on some of these kind of mind teaser games kinds of things. So this is a resource that may be interesting for you. It may not. I think the claims that you will actually increase your capacity by playing these games is questionable. Maybe, maybe not. But it's worth knowing that there are some claims out there to that effect. Training for your skills, right? You are here because you want to listen to talks, because you want to interact with awesome people, because you want to get better at your craft. And so this is, you know what you're doing, right? Video training like Pluralsight is outstanding ways of being able to do stuff. Instructor-led training, there are so many ways that you can get better at your craft, and you know about those. I probably don't need to go too much more into that. Another thing too, right? In order to work optimally, you need to shut down every now and then. You need to do some things that recharge your batteries, right? This is maybe more hardware than software, but it's got a software component too, right? This was a picture of my daughter on her 9th birthday. Her 10th birthday is next week. So this is one of those things to me that, again, right back to why we're doing these things, and really just getting out of the office and doing some of those things. So that is kind of my start of some of the things that you can do to upgrade yourself and really make yourself the best you that you can be. Further, we're going to talk about some things about the way that you work. But I want to just take a moment here. And do you have any questions, anything that you want me to address before we get going any further? What questions do you have? Anybody? I think I can see. All right, nothing popping in. So I want this to be interactive too. So if you want to jump in and ask me something at any point, you can try to get my attention. I can mostly see most of you. It's a little harder up at the top with the lights in my eyes. But so focus, right? Getting in the zone, right? Finding that capability where you do your best work. I released a podcast episode today, an interview with J.B. Rainsberger, who is a really neat guy in the test-driven development community world and a psychology kind of emphasis in a lot of the training and consulting that he does. And he has some materials about the Pomodoro technique and about the idea that getting in the zone is not about spending a lot of time doing it. It's about focusing in. So, first and foremost, right, you don't need notifications, right? You don't need Slack always telling you that somebody's talking to you. You don't need Skype. You don't need your email telling you that you have new email. That thing drives me nuts, right? Why is Gmail's default to do notifications, right? When you, on your phone, it's crazy, right? Email is meant to be checked, not to be pushed to you, right? You shouldn't be getting notifications. So my advice to you when you want to work is to disable notifications. Now with things like Slack and chat with your team, you can't do that all the time. But when you really want to do something serious, you need to be out of that stuff. You can't be having interruptions all the time. I really recommend the Pomodoro technique. Who uses the Pomodoro technique here? Only a few. Who knows what it is? A lot more, yeah. So without going into too much detail on it and the real mechanics, the simple premise of the Pomodoro technique is that you can't focus all day, right? You're not going to be able to go to the office and do your 8 to 5 and just be a machine the whole day, right? You have a limited capacity. Mark Siemens did a talk at NDC 2014, I believe it was, Oslo, and he pointed out that the attention span of a typical human adult is 10 seconds. I'm not really sure where he got that number from, but that's even if that's not accurate, if it's not that extreme, well, you still are not going to be able to focus all day. The idea of the Pomodoro technique is take breaks, right? Commit yourself to a dedicated time period. Right? The canonical example is 25 minutes, right? If you can't stay focused on one task for 25 minutes, well, maybe you should try less. But I think most of us, functioning adults, can do 25 minutes of uninterrupted task time. Really, you can probably do more. And I've experimented with being a programmer. More than that is probably, with the context involved in software development and building that up, it's often better to do longer time periods. I saw some research somewhere once, and I don't know how they came to this conclusion, but the conclusion was that you should work for 52 minutes and then take 17-minute breaks in between. And it sounds contrived. I'm really not sure why that is, but that's a fairly decent number, right? 50 minutes is something that most of us can handle, and to each his own, right? So the numbers. The canonical number in Pomodoro is 25 minutes with 5-minute breaks in between, and then some more complications beyond that. But that's you can read more about the Pomodoro technique if you want to go further with that. The idea is work uninterrupted, turn off your notifications, dedicate yourself to this time period, and that's it. So another part of actually, I didn't want to go there yet. Another part of avoiding interruptions is this getting out of the office. Mark Siemens in his presentation said work from home. And I think that's a really good productivity technique, right? Offices are interruption factories. That was exactly what David Heinemeier Hansson said on my podcast, that that's one of the reasons that Basecamp, that they work remotely, is that it's just a better way to do it. And I think there's limitations to that, right? There's nothing like face-to-face communication to really get your message across. But at the same time, being away from interruptions, being able to get up and brew yourself some tea and walk away. That's another thing that J.B. Rainsberger talks about with the Pomodoro technique, is that those breaks in between those focused periods should not be just checking your email, should not be staying there at your desk and doing something like that, right? Get out of your chair, walk, right? Move your body, do something. And I think that's really great advice. There's been some dogma coming out recently saying that, people talking about standing desks and all of those things. And I think there's something to that, right? The saying that sitting is the new smoking, I think is hyperbolic and probably beyond reality. But at the same time, right, even if you don't go all the way to a standing desk, just getting out of your seat every now and then is a pretty good way to deal with that. So, flow, right? I put a picture of a book here that really talks a lot about this state of flow, right? And who's familiar with the concept of flow? Surprising. I thought that would be more, right? So it's something that, you hear about athletes being in the zone, right? That's something that is frequently said about somebody who is really at their utmost performance, somebody who is in a state of mind of focus so intense that everything else seems to move away. And developers, I think we've mostly had that experience where you get so immersed in trying to solve the problem that you're dealing with that time just kind of slips away. And I've done that working in an office where my wife expected me home at 5 o'clock, and I look at the clock and it's 7:30, and it's I didn't realize that time had passed because I was just so deep in that problem. This is where we typically do our best work, when we are so focused, so deep, right? It is a mental state. It was a psychologist who came up with this term, a professor of psychology. His name, I have a terrible time trying to pronounce it. I believe it's pronounced Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, something like that, right? He's a really interesting guy. He has a TED Talk that's really worth seeing, and that's in my list of links as well. And the title of his TED Talk was about maximizing happiness, which I thought was pretty awesome. He had a really neat graphic in his slides in the TED Talk, which is what you're seeing here on the right side of the slide. And he emphasized that you have challenges that you're trying to face. You have skills that may or may not match those challenges. And when you have mismatches of challenges and skills, you have varying degrees of things like boredom. And you can get into stress states where your challenges are beyond your skills. And this sweet spot where the flow is generated is where you have challenges that are just beyond your current potential, where you're really pushing yourself. It forces you to focus in on that task in order to be able to accomplish it, because without that, you're not going to be able to find that extra gear to be able to find the way to get into that place that you're able to accomplish that task. If you have a challenge that is easy for you, then focus is not required, right? So I really encourage you to watch that TED Talk, because he really introduced this concept of flow. He's the guy that applied the term flow to this state of utmost focus, of the ultimate in productivity. So neat guy. Mark Siemens' talk, too, about flow was great. I came across that talk with Mark Siemens because he was on a podcast, right? .NET Rocks had an episode with Mark, that came out after NDC. I think they recorded it at NDC, and it was about flow, and it was about that talk. And .NET Rocks, the second best developer podcast in the world, right? So, I think those are really good resources, too, listening to Mark Siemens talk about flow, both in the video of that talk, and I have that linked as well as in that podcast episode. So Mark talked too about test-driven development as being a really good source of flow. Not only a way to focus and get feedback cycles, and that's something that Stephen Kotler in his book, The Rise of Superman, which is very much about flow. It's a book that I sort of recommend. It's a book that has a lot of good information in it about flow, but it also is really focused on stories of extreme athletes and how the risk involved in extreme athletes, right? People who are jumping out of helicopters on skis to try to do some extreme skiing down a mountain, that if they mess up, they die, right? And that is really a good trigger for focus and a good way to get into flow, right? So he really told a lot of stories of extreme athletes that if you're into extreme athletes, that's kind of fun. But I think it was really, to me, it was a lot of fluff, but there was still some really good, kind of neuroscience stuff in there. So it's a book that I recommend, but there's a lot of, the signal to noise ratio is pretty low. So anyway, neat stuff about this state of flow. Mark Siemens talked about test-driven development as a way to get some of those feedback cycles that are also cited by Stephen Kotler as being sources of flow. So Stephen Kotler emphasized feedback. Mark Siemens said test-driven development. Obviously, that's kind of, to me, the pinnacle of what we've achieved in software development as far as rapid feedback and being able to understand quickly whether the thing that you do actually did what you intended it to do. So that's worth listening to as well. I liked this quote from Csikszentmihalyi, if I'm saying that right. He really emphasized that you gain joy, right? The greatest rewards in life are not from kicking back and enjoying it, right? You're not going to get to some point where you've made it in your life and now you're going to enjoy it. Let's enjoy the journey, right? These challenges, these times when we're trying something new, something difficult, something just beyond our current grasp and reaching for that thing and achieving it, those are the times of greatest rewards. So I want to talk to, well, actually, let's pause for a moment too. That was a lot of stuff. Comments, questions, what do you have to say about flow? I know you have some opinions on it. No, so, there's a hand over there. Don't dig too deep in the problem. Okay, that's a good comment, yes. So yeah, don't dig too deep is the advice that we have. And, Mark Siemens in his talk as well talked about not dealing with whole systems, right? That it's hard to reason about whole systems and that you can't really grasp the whole system and focus in on that problem. You can't keep the whole thing in your mind at a time. And so to deal with portions of systems, right? Deal with parts. And so I think that's really good advice and very related to not digging too deep, right? And of course related to test-driven development where you're often testing units and whatever that means, right? That could be a whole talk to itself, but rather than digging into whole problems. So what other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. That's true, yeah.
And you have meetings, you have Skype, you have all kind of other messaging systems, right? Many places people just expect you to react within a few minutes or so.
Yeah, so the comment was that in most workplaces, it's not necessarily possible to work in a focused manner. And I think that's exactly what DHH said, right? Offices are interruption factories, and you are expected to be on Slack, right? You are expected to respond to everything, and that your email should be, within minutes. You should have a response to every email. And yeah, those situations are not conducive to being able to get into the zone. Those are not conducive to being able to work optimally. So I guess that leads into a question, well, what do you do about that, right? And I think, if you can negotiate some flexibility and ability to work from home some of the time, that's a good answer to that, right? That was something that Mark Siemens definitely spelled out. There are, and blocking off some time on your calendar, fostering a culture where headphones mean that you have this uninterrupted time. Of course, you've got to get buy-in from your coworkers and potentially from managers as well. So yes, there are barriers in most places, and at some point you might come to the decision of, well, is this the right place for me to work if I cannot move this culture towards being able to have some uninterrupted work time? And but of course we all need to be flexible as well, right? You are there to serve this organization, and if they need to be able to have some meetings, and I would say that 90% of meetings are a waste of time. But there is that 10% that do make some sense, and so flexibility is necessary. So I mean, it's always a balancing act, right? What else? Go ahead.
Unfortunately, not all the tasks are ideally interesting for you. So usually you get some boring tasks. How do you deal with it?
So the comment was that this ideal of having a challenging task is great if you have a challenging task. And yeah, we are often put into situations where there's a lot of grunt work, right? There's a lot of things that need to be done by somebody, and you drew the short straw, or you're the guy that's the newest to the team, or girl, right? Is that an okay gender term? So you are the person on the team that is newest, and so you might get this task that nobody wants to do, and I think that some of those things just need to be done, and it's not going to be optimal, right? And boredom sets in, and really try to get those things done so that you can move on. And there are many different situations, right? It could be that you are the grunt worker on the team, and that's all you have is boring task after boring task. That's often the case with newer developers. I suspect most of us here are probably more experienced and don't have that kind of a situation, and it's probably more occasionally getting into unchallenging tasks rather than all of the time. That might not necessarily be the case. If you are in a place where you have boring tasks all of the time and you are experienced enough to find another job, I think that would probably be my advice there. But if you're the newbie and you still have some room to grow, then you take on those tasks, you do them to the best of your ability, and you try to prove that you're worthy of some more challenging tasks. What other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Isn't flow just part of the equation, because another part is teamwork and sharing knowledge between people and coordinating their work, I think.
Absolutely. So the comment is that flow and individual performance is only a part of that thing, and I really should have given a disclaimer to this whole thing, right? I'm talking about individual performance, which local optimizations sometimes help the system as a whole, and sometimes don't, right? There can be situations where a developer moving faster means that all of a sudden there's a backlog for the QA organization, and it slows down everything, right? And so depending on the structure of your organization, there probably shouldn't be a QA organization, but you get the point, right? That there are times when local optimizations aren't in the best interests of the team as a whole. So yes, it's probably a better topic to think about how do you optimize teams. But at the same time, personal performance matters too. And if you aren't able to get done the things that are assigned to you, then you're going to have a bad time, right? Life suffers, and things don't go as well for you. So being the best that you can be, while not necessarily an optimization to your team, it usually is beneficial in the long run. So, upgrading how you work, the next thing that I think about is, my admonition is, you should know how to use your tools. And at the risk of insulting a lot of people in here, I don't like seeing somebody using Visual Studio and clicking around in Solution Explorer with the mouse. Right? You should never have to use your mouse in Visual Studio. It has a fantastic keyboard story, especially with ReSharper, and that's a whole other religious debate. But so I don't mean to insult you and say that you're doing it wrong if you're using the mouse. At one point, I had a presentation that had a graphic that was the Cobra Kai from the Karate Kid dojo, says that using the mouse is for the weak. I'm not going to go that far, right? That's too far, right? But you can do better. And all of us can do better. I can do better, right? I am not the epitome of efficiency and optimal performance. So there's always room to improve. And I think that's one of the cool things about pair programming, is that you can see how somebody else does something, and you can say, hey, that's a pretty good way to do that. How did you do it, right? So know how to use your tools is my general advice. And I think we could turn this into, let's share our keyboard controls in Visual Studio all day, but I don't think that would be the most productive use of our time. So let's talk a little bit about productivity tools, right? Obviously, a majority of us are, lovers of Visual Studio and think that that's a great productivity tool. But what do you think is the best productivity tool? I'm curious for thoughts on this. Coffee machine, I like that. That's a good one. That you probably have mine beat there. That's a good one. I like it. Closing down notifications. Yes, yes. Getting rid of interruptions. That's probably your best productivity tool. That's good. That's going to beat what I have as best too. So yeah, I think those are really good ones. So I have a strange best productivity tool. This is going to surprise and shock and alarm you. Email. Right? Email is the opposite of a productivity tool. No. I love email. I think it's really the best way to deal with your tasks, to deal with your life. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So David Allen, Getting Things Done, right? He has the concept of an inbox. And I don't want to dig into getting things done. It's really not necessarily my preferred way of approaching tasks. But inbox, right? He's got the concept of an inbox. Things are flowing in, tasks are coming in, and my response to creating another inbox, whether it be on paper like David Allen recommends or something else, my response is like the French occupants of the castle in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right? You've already got one, right? You have an inbox. Your email is your inbox. That's where I go for my tasks, okay? So let me show you my inbox. Okay? And I've got a couple things in here. And so I'm a religious believer in the concept of a zero-item inbox. So every time that you visit your inbox, you should leave it with 0 items. Now, obviously, when you come in, it's not going to be 0 items. Okay? And let's say that I have this task that came to me in my email. And am I going to do that now? No. Right? I use a tool, I use a service to be able to postpone my email to a better time, right? So I can forward this email to say, when am I going to do this? Oh, I'll do it in 4 hours, okay? I forward this to 4 hours at the service that I use. And my friend decided to tweet about me, and so I can just archive that, right? When I go to Twitter, I'm going to see that anyway, so. So I'm back to a 0-item inbox. Now, that doesn't mean that I did everything in my inbox. I didn't necessarily handle it. But there was something there that required action. I didn't do it right now. I deferred it to later. And that's how I handle my inbox. And so anything that comes into my email, I get to make a decision. Is this something I need to read? If it's not, well, archive it right away. If it is something I need to read, well, is now the time to read it? If it is, okay, I read it. If not, then when is the right time to read it? Forward it to my service that's going to send it back to me at that time. And just to show you that, I use this service called followup.cc. Now they've changed their pricing model, and you're probably not going to use that. There's an alternative called followupthen.com, which is linked in my notes on this thing. If you think that this is a good idea and you want to handle things the way that I do, then I really recommend that service. It's much cheaper than followup.cc. I got grandfathered in on this on some old pricing, and so it's still useful for me, but you don't want to pay the prices that they're charging now. But Follow-Up Then is a good alternative with reasonable prices. So if I say 1 minute and then say hello NDC, right? I'm going to get an email in my inbox in 1 minute. So that's the way these services work. And so to me, anything that's in your inbox means it's something that you need to deal with in some way. Now, it could be that way of dealing with it is just archive it, right? And ideally, you're not stuck using Outlook because Outlook is just painful, right? Gmail is so much nicer. But nonetheless, these services work. It's pure SMTP, right? You are just sending out an email, and ultimately, you're going to get an email back. So that is my recommendation for handling tasks, and it's a super easy way to do that. And look at that. I'm back to a 0-item inbox, no sweat. So email, great productivity tool. Yeah, go ahead.
There's this Google Inbox.
Google Inbox, yes. Right, yes, Google Inbox is an alternative too, and it has a snooze feature that does this same thing, and it's cool, it's good. I don't like it because I can't do it purely, purely keyboard with all of the flexibility that I can by just typing, a number of hours or a specific day. But yes, so if I did go to inbox.google.com, this is really just an alternate view on the inbox from Gmail. And you can, if I had something in my inbox, which I don't, but I can look at. Hello. I can look at a folder that I have, right? A label, I should say. And if I wanted to snooze some item, and I never use inbox, so I'm not as familiar with it. I expect that it should have the same keyboard controls as regular Gmail, but I don't know. So Alt-S does the snooze feature, and then I can choose from some options here. But if I really want to pick a specific time, pick a specific date, then I have a little bit more cumbersome flow to try to do that. If I want to say, from my so I got back my 1 minute, right? If I say that I want to do this on, June 27th, I can just do that very easily right here, right? Without having to do any kind of touching my mouse. And so to me, this is easier. Of course, there is a price tag with it. And, the snooze feature in Google Inbox is free. So, different priorities on this thing. I think that having a service like this is well worth the, I think it's $5 or $10 a month or something like that. But if it keeps your inbox clear, and I think it's easier than using inbox, make your own decisions about that. So email as my favorite productivity tool. That's kind of a crazy thought, right? But so that's my reasoning behind that. I think rather than having a to-do list. And I wrote a blog post at one point about, and I got a link to that, about how to-do lists are they're just painful, right? Having a giant list of all of the things that you need to do just sends me the message of, I'm never going to get all of this done, right? It's demoralizing to see a list that instead of shrinking is growing. Right? Like you keep adding things to that list. I hate it. Other people might have different experiences of using a to-do list. I used to use Remember the Milk, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew. This is better for me, right? I have the things that I need to deal with now, and if I can't deal with them now, I defer them to a time that's better. So that is my productivity tip for using email as your to-do list. Next best productivity tool. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, question.
With the approach that you've just shown, right, of using emails, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it a danger that not all tasks are equally important, right? Especially when you look at your life and some stuff is important, some stuff is urgent. Isn't that a little bit of a problem with this email approach, right? Because at some point, right when you get that in, you're making a decision when you're going to do that, right? Versus a to-do list, right? It might grow and grow and grow. But it's easier for you to decide which tasks to do.
So the comment is that in email, you don't really have any prioritization. You don't have a differentiation of this task is more important, and therefore I want to get to it first. With a to-do list, you can do that sorting and put your most important tasks at the top. You can eat the frog first, is the kind of the Brian Tracy, I think, is the name of the author, that said that you should take on that task, that unpleasant thing that you don't want to do, first thing to get that done in your day. So I think that's a good point, that yes, you don't have priority inside of your inbox. I would argue that the to-do list, while it does have priority, it's not showing you the size of tasks too, right? So you could have something enormous, and so yes, this thing is high priority, but I can't get it done today, so I'm just going to pick the next thing. And so you start cherry picking your to-do list as well. With email, at least you have this time component, right? With a service like Follow Up Then, or Snooze from Inbox. You have this time component where you can say that this thing is important enough that I want to deal with it, on such and such date, right? I want to deal with it next week. I want to deal with it this week. week. And follow-up then and follow-up.cc have those kinds of things, right? I can send an email to, next Monday, or I can send it to January 27th, or, 1 year from now, or, 30 days from now, so all of those kinds of things. So I think by putting that time component on it, you do get an element of priority. Though when things do come back to you, yes, there's not any priority. It's all one list. And I like to process my email as a stack, right? I just go to the most recent one and just figure out if I'm going to deal with that thing and just go down the list till eventually I'm at a point where I've decided that this is the thing that I'm going to work on now. Other thoughts? So if this doesn't work for you, then it was a suggestion that didn't necessarily work for you. But I found it to be a better way, and I suggest at least thinking about it. To me, next best productivity tool, I grouped a bunch of things here together. To me, this is automation, right? That thing that you don't have to do is the most efficient thing that you can do. I put some services on here, right? IFTTT and Zapier. You guys familiar with these? And there's a new entrant in the market, Microsoft Flow. Have you seen that? Microsoft has created their own. I haven't really dug into it to see how useful it is. These things are awesome, right? Who uses IFTTT? Not many. Okay? If you're writing code to make, Google Drive do something, or Gmail, or Trello, or a multitude of services on the internet that have APIs, you might not have to write that code, because these services are basically event-driven orchestration, workflow orchestration that you can do without writing any code. You go to their user interface, you OAuth, authenticate your Google account, your Trello account, whatever accounts it is, and they support a ton of things. GitHub, right, and Bitbucket are supported on these services as well. I have some Zapier zaps that whenever I push commits into some Bitbucket repositories, that it tracks those into another service that I use to keep track of things that I did today, right? So I like having, instead of a to-do list, a done list. And so whenever I do commits, those commit messages become dones in my done list. And I get emails that say, hey, 6 months ago, here's what you did. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, that was kind of cool. I did that. So, a lot of my commits are getting automatically pushed into I done this, which I think is also linked up in this thing. So, but IFTTT and Zapier are cool, and I always share these things with non-programmers because this is the way that they can be programmers, right? You are instructing machines what to do when you use these things, but you don't have to write any code to do that. Which I know you're saying, well, I can write code, so, but the code that you don't have to write is the code that doesn't have bugs. So if you want to, when something happens in one place, then something happens in another place, including locations on your Android phone, right? I've got in IFTTT, I've got a recipe that logs every time I leave my house, just so it's not really that useful, but I've got records of it. I've got a Withings smart body analyzer that's basically a glorified scale that's Wi-Fi connected. It also measures body fat with an electrical current that goes through your body. Whenever I step on my scale, and this thing is, it's got an IFTTT integration, I automatically log my weight, my body composition, all kinds of things into a Google spreadsheet. I've also got one that if my weight goes above a threshold, it posts to Facebook telling everybody I know that I need some help, I need some shame to try to, to get back under control. So, just some examples of something happens in one place, you can do it in another. You don't have to write any code. Really cool stuff. I'll also put Powershell on here, right? That's one of my religions, is that you should be writing scripts to do a lot of stuff, right? And so From things like, if I want to start a new project and I'm, creating a Visual Studio solution in a repository, well, I've got a script that does a few commits that create me a new solution and kind of get me started, pops open Visual Studio with the solution open, so that I don't have to go through all of those nasty dialogues and, all of the things where I always get the wrong options and don't add to the existing solution and all of that stuff, right? Automate some things that are painful for you. So PowerShell is a wonderful thing. Who uses PowerShell? I really wish that was more. PowerShell is awesome, right? You often, when you are talking to, and we're mostly Windows people here, right? Talking to people who are not using Windows, and I'm using Windows. Ignore the glowing apple on my computer. I'm running Windows. So when you talk to people who don't use Windows, right? It's not as bad as it used to be, but they used to look down their nose at you, right, and say, you're not using the command line, right? You're not scripting things out. There was one guy that I worked with that was this hardcore Java programmer, and he said that people who were getting .NET certifications are certified drag and droppers, and as much as he's wrong about that, he also had a point, right? We should be using the command line, so do that. And PowerShell is cool because it has aliases for everything, right? You can use bash commands against PowerShell. You can use the CMD commands, and it just knows. It knows everything. It's like talking to your spouse, right? Or like having some intermediary that knows how to talk to your spouse, right? It's beautiful. So it just it understands whatever it is that you're telling it. So it's great. And then beyond that, of course, Visual Studio, right? We all love Visual Studio. Keyboard-driven workflow. Live your life from the keyboard inside of Visual Studio, and you will be happy. So this is my page that I have on my site that has the links that I mentioned. And I think we're actually getting close to the edge of our time here. So that should be an easy URL to go to, and that will have the things that that you're seeking. If you want to see that Pam Selly video, if you want to see Csikszentmihalyi and his TED Talk, if you want to see Mark Siemens, all of those things are linked up there. Oh, and links to IFTTT, Zapier, and a bunch of the services and follow up then, all of those things. So with that, what other questions are there? Nothing else? Okay, I think, do you guys want to, yeah, I'm Dave, of course, right? Yeah, so remember that. Listen to Developer on Fire. It's awesome. You're really going to enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. I have been considering that some of this stuff about workflows, managing tasks, being awesome in Visual Studio and PowerShell. If there is interest, I could maybe put together some kind of course related to that stuff if people are interested in that. So I don't have it up yet on this page, but I could put kind of a mailing list kind of a thing there if you're interested. So I'll put that up sometime today. That if you want to express interest in something like that, if enough people are interested, then maybe something like that might go forward. So, but with that. I did have some plans to try to share some PowerShell and do some things, but I think we don't have time for any of that. So I think let's just go ahead and conclude here. Oh, and stickers. I have Developer on Fire stickers if you want some of those. So.